What's going on, everybody? James here from Artificial Entertainment, and welcome back for another Unreal Engine 5 tutorial. In this one, I'm going to show you how to set up a really cool itemized pickup system that'll react differently based off of the object type that you're picking up. So let's go ahead and take a look at how we set this up. So I have here a fairly fresh project folder. I have added a couple things in here, just some weapons and other things, so that way I have items to be able to show you as we pick up and, have it do different things. But we're going to be utilizing a few different things to be able to create categories for our weapons, as well as individual names and items, as well as some other values that we can set as well. So I'm going to show you guys how to set all this up, and I'm just going to do this all in a new folder. So I'm going to right click, go new folder, and we're going to go just type in assets. Now what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and double click and open this up, and we're going to go with a blueprint interface as the first thing we create, as this is going to be the thing that allows us to communicate with other objects in the world from our third-person character. So what we're going to do is from the right-click menu, go to Blueprints, and we're going to go Blueprint Interface. And again, because this is for interaction, we're just going to go interact underscore, and then we'll double-click and open that up. And then from the function here, we're just going to rename this to interact. That's this option up here. Now, once you've named it, you can just compile and save, and we'll come back to this later because we're going to need to build up a few more. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to make two enumerations. So we're going to go right-clicking, go to Blueprints, and Enumeration. And now we'll just highlight it and Control-D to duplicate it, so this way we have both of them. And then the first one, we're just going to F2 to rename, and then we're going to call this one World Objects. So this is going to be all the objects within our world, all the individual items. So like if you have stone and different types of swords, like rusted sword, hero sword, demon sword, like all the different items in the game, this is where you would put it, is inside this enumeration. However, this one is going to be object types, because this is going to be the categories that we're going to set for like resources and melee weapons and pistols and, all the different things that you're going to have under certain categories. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll start setting these enumerations really quickly. So I'm going to open up the object types first, and we're going to add three different object types. So the first one is going to be swords. Second one is going to be pistols. And the last one here is going to be utility. So this is going to be like for a flashlight or other things like that. So we'll get these set up here, and then we're going to minimize and open up the World Objects menu, and we're going to add, again, three enumerators because we've got three different items. I mean, you could set this up with like 16 if you wanted to, but for the video today, we're just going to set it with one of each type of item. So we'll go ahead and we're just going to type in sword in the first one. Second one is going to be sidearm, and then the last one is going to be flashlight. Now, I know they're not very fancy names, but doesn't really have to be. You can name these whatever you want. But these are going to be the items as we kind of know them. Now again, because I only have one sword, one pistol, and we're just doing the flashlight for utility, that's why I just name these generically. Although I do recommend that if you have individual items like a bunch of different types of swords and pistols, make sure to give them specific names so this way they can be properly referenced within your menus. So now that we have this set up, we can just go ahead and save, minimize, and we're going to add something else here. We're going to go right click, Blueprint class, and we're going to click on actor type because we're going to set up a interactable object blueprint ahead of time because we're going to need it for the next step. So what we're going to do is when we make it, we're just going to type in interactable object. And now once we have that, now what we're going to do is we're going to right click and we're going to go back to blueprints, and this time we're going to add a structure. Now, if you don't know what a structure is, it's essentially a combination of variables and values that are hooked up to something else. So like, for example, when you're doing a line trace and you use the break hit result for the line trace and you get all those like location data and face values and, the actor object reference, all that stuff that you get out of it, that is a struct. That's a series of variables that has been set up by Unreal Engine, so you didn't have to be able to have certain information about things that are hit by that line trace. However, you can make structures as well within Unreal Engine by doing just like this, by right-clicking and creating a new structure. So this one is actually going to be the object info struct. Because just like how a line trace has different variables and information about all the things that hit, we want to get all the information about our objects and give, certain values that we can then use for each individual object. So with this struct, we're going to go ahead and double click and open it up. And the first thing you'll see here is we have this, new variable here, and it's set to a Boolean value. What we're going to do is we're going to double click so we can rename this, and we're just going to call this object class. And then from here, we're going to look for our interactable object, and we're going to make sure to set it as a class reference. Now we're going to go add variable again, and this one's going to be object name. And this one, we're just going to set to a string value. And then we're going to add one more here, and this is going to be the object type. And this one, we're going to set to the object type enum that we created. Now, we are going to be using the object name enum, but it's not going to be within the structure here. I'll show you guys what we're going to be doing with that here in a moment. But now that we have the object class, the object's name, and the type, we can go ahead and just save this. That's all we need to do here. However, if you want to do things like your swords have different strengths and you have health potions and a whole bunch of other things, you could add things like a strength variable here. That would be maybe hooked up to like a float value. And this way you could set a different float value for your swords, your pistols, everything will have its own value that you can then use to code off of inside of the blueprints. So this is where you would add all the additional information that you would want to have associated to all the interactable objects. So we're just going to go minimize this, and now we're going to add one more thing here. So we're going to right click. This time we're going to go to miscellaneous, and we're going to look for data table. Now, as you can see here, we got pick row structure. And because we made that object info struct, that's actually going to be the one we're going to use. So we're going to go to the drop down menu here and object, and get that object info struct, and then click OK. And then we're just going to go object info underscore DT. Now, I know some of you might be wondering, why is it that we have an object info struct and a data table? Well, realistically, the struct and the data tables, these two kind of work hand in hand, and I'll show you what I mean. We'll open this up here. And you'll see that the things that we set in this struct, so we've got the object class, object name, and object type, are all now set up in grid type categories that we can then use. So if I go add, we get a new row, and then I can add information to all of these. So like, for example, I can go sword, and then I can go add two more here, and then we're going to go sidearm. And then we'll add another one here, and we'll add this as flashlight. So this is where you would actually re-add all the object names again. Now, you want to make sure, though, now up here, it doesn't really matter too much. So if it's not exactly correct, it's not that big of a deal, but that's up here. But however, when you set the object name down here, it needs to be exactly the same as what you have for the object, or for the name under world objects. So make sure that the world object name, so as sword, sidearm, flashlight, make sure that's exactly the same as what you set it as for the object name in the data table. So we'll do for the sword, sidearm, and flashlight. So we don't have any object classes, so we can't set the blueprint values on these yet, but we can set the other values. So for example, sword is going to be under swords and object name of sword. Sidearm is going to be object class of none. We'll set it for after. We'll go sidearm as the object name, and we'll set this to pistols as the object type. Then we go down to flashlight, do the same thing. We'll name this flashlight, and we make sure to set this to the class of utility. And again, making sure that we set this to the same name that we set these, both capitalization and spelling, on the enumeration. So we'll go ahead and save this, minimize, and we're going to start making some information. This way we can actually have the objects to be able to populate within our data table under the class reference. So we're going to go and open up our interactable object. This is the blueprint that we made. We're going to go to the Components tab. We're going to go to the blueprint, My Blueprint section here, and we're going to add two variables. First one is going to be the object info. This is going to be the object info struct that we added. And then we're going to add another one here, and this is going to be the object name, and we're going to set this from the world objects enum that we made. Now from here, we're just going to go and pull up the construction script here, and we're going to zoom in, and then off of the construction script here, we're just going to type in data table. And then if we scroll down to the bottom here, you'll see get data table row. And from the data or select asset, we can select on the object info DT. I got confused for a moment, but I forgot that I have some assets in here for source object. They must have their own data table. So we'll click on the object info data table, the one that we made. Now you can see here we have a row name object that we want to make sure to set the name for, and that's where this object name enumeration comes into play. Because what we can do, we can just drag off of this. We're going to type in string and set enum to string, and then we'll plug this in right into the row name, and it'll put string to name. This is just a little workaround because in enumeration, when you convert it, by default, it goes to a byte, which isn't always registered as something that you could even possibly understand. they're originally coded, and at which point you would have to know how to be able to understand it, read it, and comprehend it within a fraction of a second usually because, well, it's not going to really be displayed for long unless you set it up in a widget. But either way, let's set it up through names, do it proper. Now, what we're going to do from here is we're going to take the object info, we're going to drag it out and get the setter node, and then we're going to go row found into the execution, out row into the object info. This way, it'll set the out row info and make sure that this is going to be set off of the proper information based off of whatever, type of information that we put within the child actor blueprint. And again, this is going to make a lot more sense as we make the child blueprints. Now, what we're also going to do is we're going to go up to class settings under interfaces, and we're going to want to make sure to add the interaction interface that we created. Now, we're not going to do anything with it just yet, but make sure just to throw it into that way it's actually in the blueprint before you actually start making the child actors. Because what we can do now is we're going to right-click on the interactable object, go up to Create Child Blueprint Class, and this one is going to be Sword. And then we're going to do that one more time, create child blueprint class, and this one is going to be flashlight. And then one last time on the interactable objects, right click, create child blueprint class, and this one is going to be pistol. So now what we'll do is we'll start with the flashlight, and we're just going to make a few changes in the component section. So we're going to go add and look for a static mesh. And then I'm just going to name this flashlight. Then what I'm going to do is go to the static meshes here and just add it in like so. I can go ahead and compile and save that. And then we'll go ahead and minimize this. And we're going to open up the pistol one next. Go to the components tab here. Add, and this time it's going to be a skeletal mesh. And we're going to go pistol. And then we're just going to go ahead to the skeletal mesh and we're going to look for the pistols A. It's the Fonzie pistol. All right, so we'll compile and save. Enough of that tomfoolery. And we'll open up the sword blueprint class here. And we're going to go components, add. I think these are static meshes, but I could be wrong. Let's see. Bet you they're skeletal. Yep, they are skeletal. I don't use this pack very much, so we're going to go add, and then skeletal mesh. And then sword. And then we're just going to type in sword, and we'll just pick any of them. We'll go SK Sword 1. Sure. Why not? All right, so I just jumped over the shader compiling, so that way you guys didn't have to sit there forever and, watch the shaders. I know I don't like doing that, so wouldn't want to make you guys do that. But this is just a sword that I got from one of the packs here. So we got a sword, we got a pistol, and we also have our flashlight. So now what we're going to do, though, is we're going to go up to where it says the self for each of the blueprints. And we're going to go to Object Info, and we're going to go to Object Class, and make sure to set Flashlight as that object class. And Object Type, we're going to set to Utility, and Object Name is going to be Flashlight. And then we're going to go to the pistol, do the same thing, go up to Self, go to the Object Info little drop down here, and make sure to set Object Name to Sidearm, Object Class to Pistol, and Object Type to Pistols. This way we can compile and save that as well. And then we're going to go to the sword and do the same thing. So we're going to go Object Class, Sword, Object Type, Swords, and Object Name, Sword. Compile and save. Now we're not done yet though. So now we have to go back to our data table and we're going to set the values on the object class on this as well. So we're going to go Object Class and we're going to set the sword to sword, sidearm to the pistol, and the flashlight to flashlight. Because now we have everything set up in our data table. So what we can do, just so that way we can see if it's working, is we can pull up the event graph for any one of these. Zoom into event begin play, and we'll just pull off and we'll go print string. And then we're just going to pull this off here, and we're going to get the object info struct. So we're going to get object info, and then we're just going to right click, split the struct pin, and object info name will plug into the in string section. So now if I compile and save, minimize, and it'll only work for the flashlight as that's the only thing that I currently have it coded to. But if I just go and hit play, you'll see flashlight is printed on the top of my screen. So it's getting the name of this object. In this way, it'll actually be able to determine that this is a flashlight type and it's the type of utility, because we have set that within the actual blueprint itself. So there's some things you have to do within the blueprint, but it's realistically just setting the values here. So that's really all you're doing, is just, and you don't even have to set the object name here. because it's being set from the data table already. So this is the reason why you want to make sure to have all of these together and make sure to have these set up, because it's going to set that name by default. It's just good to always make sure to set the object, class, and type within the blueprint as well. I don't know if it's necessary. I've never done it without. I always double set it. But if you guys, if you guys don't and you decide to try single setting it, let me know what happens. But so now that we have the ability to differentiate between different items, so I can put a sword, a pistol, and a flashlight into the world. So I'm going to go ahead and just do that now. I'll drag one of each into the world. Now, there's another thing that we're going to have to do, though. We're going to need to create a collision to be able to make like a very light detection system. Now, you guys could also use the line trace interaction system that I showed you guys how to make in another video, and I'll put a link to that into the description of this video, because that actually works really well with this. But we're just going to actually use a very simple kind of overlap detection system. So what we'll need to do is we're going to go to third person, blueprints, BP third person character. And what we're going to do is make sure that we add that interaction interface to our blueprint. So we're going to go interact and interact interface. And then we're going to pull up the event graph here. And what we're going to do is we're going to go keyboard event E. You can also make a customized input by, going to edit and project settings, all that good stuff. But we're just going to use it doing the old-fashioned way. Now, what we also want to do, though, is we want to get all the information about any overlapping actors that we currently have. So what we're going to do is we're going to get overlapping actors, and we're going to leave the class filter as blank. And what we're going to do is overlapping actors, we're going to go for loop with break. And we're going to go off of pressed into the execute. And then out of loop body, we're just going to add a quick branch. And then we're going to go off of the array element and does implement interface. And if the return value condition, and set the interface to interact interface. So this is basically just going to take all the actors that we're overlapping, making sure that one of them at least has the interact interface. And if it does, we want to run the interaction interface. So we're going to go interact, and we want to make sure to use interact message. And then we're going to pull off of the array element here and plug that into the target. Now, there's one other thing that we're going to do, and this is just to make our lives easier, is if we go back to the interact interface, so like the actual interface blueprint itself, and we go to the input section, and we hit the little plus symbol here. We're going to do character mesh ref as the name. And then if you go to the drop down here, type in mesh component, and you see mesh component here, selected as an object reference. What this will do is it'll make it so I see a lot of people do like cast a BP third person character or get player character 0. You can do that, but this is actually a lot easier to do. Because what you can do is from the BP third person character here, you now have this character mesh reference, because we're going to need that to actually attach things to our character. So we're going to take the mesh and plug that into the mesh reference. In this way, we now have the ability to actually access the socket data from the skeleton of that mesh. And speaking of skeletons and sockets, we now have to set up some. So this comes where the fun part is. So we're going to go back to our content and go to characters. And there's actually an easy way to do this. So I'm actually going to go to my blueprints, BP third person character. And I'm just going to go for my mesh, look for the skeletal mesh component, and I'm just going to open this up. The reason why I like this is because now I have access to the skeleton mesh component, the skeleton itself, an animation asset, as well as the animation blueprint. So this little menu is really, really nice to have. And the easiest way that I found is either to use the skeleton mesh component or the animation blueprint. Either one brings it up, so it's really up to you. But what we're going to do is we're going to want to make a few different sockets to be able to make sure that things can be put into the characters, like on the character's body. So we're going to go and look for spine, and we're going to add 2 different sockets from the spine. The first one is going to be for the handgun, and this is going to be when he gets when you attach it to the character's hip. Now don't do what I did and just start moving the spine. What we want to do is right click on the spine, and we want to add socket. And we'll take this and name this to handgun socket. And then what we're going to do is just move it, and then we're going to right click, add preview asset, and we're going to look for that handgun. So I got pistols A right here. So we're going to take this, and then we're going to, usually once you add it in, the bone's going to be gone. So I just, type in handgun, There we go, handgun socket. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of move and rotate and make it so that way it kind of sits on his hip better. Makes it more look like it's attached, to the side of his hip. And, this is just done through simple rotation. Just do it until it kind of feels like it looks good for you. Because once you have that, what we're going to do is we're going to add another socket. So we're going to go back to the spine again. And this time we're going to go to spine 01, right click, add socket. This one's going to be the flashlight socket. You can also set up like a utility belt type setup if you just set up multiple sockets around the edge of the skeleton, but we're not going to do that in today's video. Just want to let you know you guys can do that. Now for the flashlight, what we're going to do is we're going to add this to his other hip here. So we're going to put that off to the other side, right click, add preview asset, and we're going to add in the flashlight. I'm also going to rescale this though. As you can tell, this is way too big. So we're going to go to the flashlight here, and we're going to set the relative scale to 0.6 across the board. Just like that. And then from here, just like what we did before, is we're going to kind of take it, rotate it, and kind of place it on his hip side. So that way at least, kind of looks like it's at least chilling on his hip. And then we're going to add one more, but this time we're going to go a little higher up on the spine. We're going to go to like spine 3, maybe even spine 4. Well, we might kind of want to go up more towards like the middle of the back. Because what we're going to do is we're going to right click, add socket, and this one's going to be sword socket. Now from here, what we're going to do is the same thing, right click, add preview asset, and we're going to want to make sure we look for that same sword that we set up. So that was SK sword 1. So I'm just going to look for the sword socket real quick, and now here we go. And we're just going to set this up so that way the sword is on his back. Not really the type of sword you would normally put on your back, but you know what? I don't really care. I break the rules. I make the rules. Oh, if only. Imagine how great it would be if you could actually be the one to make all the rules. God, that would be both tiresome and frightening at the same time for both you and everybody else, I'm sure. But that's a different matter. But anyway, so now as you can see here, we've got our sword, our pistol, and our flashlight all kind of on our character. So this is just setting up the positions for when they're actually going to be in place. So we'll go ahead and save that. And now we are having the start of our character's positioning. Now, I'm not going to go through drawing the weapons and all of that for all of these because if you have multiple items that are going to be going into the hands, like for example, we have the flashlight on one side, the pistol on the other, but the sword is going to probably be drawn from the same side as the flashlight. This means, and realistically, it's very common, the rotation for the sword and the rotation for the flashlight are probably not going to be the same. So by the time that they get into the hands, one of them is going to change. Meaning that you're going to have to either make multiple sockets or ensure that their default rotation and the way they're going to snap into place is going to be the same for every single actor mesh that you're using. So just something to keep in mind. But we're looking at just attaching and picking up and having it differentiate between the different items and attaching it or, destroying it or adding it to an inventory, however you wanted to do it. So now that we have our skeleton's position set up, what we can do is we're going to go back to the interactable object section and we're going to go to interfaces, interact. And we're going to double click, and this way it'll give us an event that we can use. So we'll just have to open it up in the event graph. So what we're going to do is we're going to go event to interact, and we're going to pull off, and we're going to go switch on object type. So, and then this will give us swords, pistols, and utility. Because we're setting all the object info here, we can actually get object info. So we can actually just drag it out from here. We'll right click, split the struct bin, and get the info object right there. So this way, whatever this is, it's going to set and make it so that way it switches and does different things based off of whatever item it is that we're interacting with. So if it's a sword, what we're going to do is we're going to attach actor to component. And we're going to use this pretty much for all of them. So we're just going to pull this off and we're just going to duplicate it a couple of times. So this way we have one for each style. This way it'll allow us to be able to attach things to, whatever one we have. And this way we can, again, have multiple swords, multiple pistols, multiple flashlights, but it'll attach them to those sockets as long as, again, you have your rotation set properly. Now, one thing actually I do suggest before duplicating it is going in and making sure to set the location rule to snap to target. This way you don't have to do this multiple times. It's just easier. Don't have to, but I do recommend it. That way you don't have to set it 6 times. Or actually, 9 times. Now from here, what we're going to do is we're going to take the character mesh reference and we're going to plug this into the parent of each of these. You can also set this as a variable if you like, but I'm going to be lazy and I'm going to make my strings look horrible and just plug this in like this. So if you have OCD like I do, I am very sorry. Don't worry, it's bothering me too, but it's just easier to do it this way for time purposes. So now that we have this set up though, one thing just to note is that you'll see that the targets is set to self. Now, because we set this as the parent for everything else, we don't actually need a reference for each individual object, because we know that if we pick up a sword and it has the object type of sword, we don't need to worry about it because it's just going to go right to the sword socket. So what we're going to do is we're going to go and get the socket names for each of these points here. So we're going to go back to our skeleton here, and we're going to get the sword socket here. So we're going to just double click and you can control C to get the name of it. And then we'll go back to our interactable object here and go socket name, control V. And we're going to do the same thing for the pistol and the utility object. So we go back to the skeleton here, and then we're just going to look for a handgun. And then we're going to take this and, whoops, double click it, control C. And then we're going to go back to our interactable object and socket name, handgun socket. And then the last one is going to be, I believe I named this flashlight. So we'll take this and double click and control C. And then again, interactable object, setting this as the socket name. Now, again, we do need to set up a couple more things because we did make sure, if we go back to the BP third person character here, you'll see that we have it set up for overlapping actors. Right now, we don't have anything set up for these to overlap with. So we're going to go to the component section of each of these for the sword, the pistol, and the flashlight. And we're going to go add. And for the sword, I'm going to add a capsule collision. And we'll go ahead and just scale it up a little bit. And then we'll move it up so this way it's kind of encompassing the whole sword. Compile and we'll save that. Go to the pistol. This time we'll add a sphere collision. And we'll keep that like that. Compile and save. And the flashlight viewport, we'll add another capsule. Just like this. Now we'll compile and save. Now again, we haven't set anything on this, but because of the fact that everything is set off of the main parent blueprint, now watch what happens. So again, we've set up the skeletal components. We've set up different data for it to be able to differentiate between all the different object types. So now I can go up, press E, and it'll attach the sword to my back. I can go up to the flashlight, get a little closer, and it'll attach this flashlight to my hip. Now again, because I changed the scale, and also, okay, so that's actually another thing that I wanted to talk about. I'm glad I forgot to do this because gives me an opportunity to show you. Now, you guys saw I was kind of getting pushed around a little bit. If you create your own meshes and you're not using assets from the Unreal Engine Marketplace, just remember that a lot of times these are going to come with collisions. So if you go to the mesh and search for collision, one thing I always recommend is making sure that it's not set to block all dynamic. Set it to custom and just double check ignore on all of it. Because now if we go ahead and hit play again, I can go up, I can collect the sword, I can go up and collect the flashlight, but now it's not pushing me around, and then I can go up and collect the pistol. Now the pistol, flashlight, and the sword are all on the character, and they're all moving appropriately. And I could set up 7 different versions of the sword, 7 different versions of the pistol, you know, and just with a simple Boolean value if we already have or don't have something equipped. Now, this is just, again, a simple pickup system, but this could also be the start of a nice inventory system as well, if you would like. I'm going to be doing a series soon on inventory systems. I just have a few other, tutorials that I want to get through first. But yeah, so that's now we have an itemized inventory system. And again, this is just for like weapons and stuff, but you could use it for picking up resources and just set different values, within, the main world object enumeration, just to add, stone, metal, all these different things, and then add in under the object classes, just set it to resources. And there you go. Now you have another item type you can use on the switch on enum. And that's the beautiful part is because again, the parent class is setting everything. You don't have to do anything from here. I can make as many child blueprint actors as I want of this, and it'll do the same thing so long as everything is set properly from those details panels once you create it. I hope you guys enjoyed. That's kind of it for today's video. I've got a few more coming out just so that way I can make sure to keep everything rolling. Also, I've got a big announcement that's going to be coming out probably the next couple of days, so keep an eye out for that, guys. But I hope you enjoyed. If you guys have any questions, comments, issues, just let me know. I'm going to leave a link to all kind of worthwhile videos for this particular one, so I'll give the flashlight, the blueprint interfaces, as well as the interaction system. I'll link all 3 of those videos down at the bottom of the description, guys, so you guys can go check that out. The interaction system will work great for this with a nice line trace system. But that's going to close it out, guys, and as always, stay animated.